Juan. So we will, atong discussion is mag-left off ta sa where we started from before sa mga three types of justice. So mag-start ta, mag-recount lang ta sa justice according to Cephalus. So as we all know na, according sa kay Cephalus, kay justice is telling the truth and pay back sa imong debts. So nganong ni-exist ni siya kay ang iyang theory is rooted in the fear of death and the moment of reckoning. So iyang gusto is before siya mamatay, iyang mga debts kay iyang ma-pay back sa mga tao as well as sa mga gods. So gi-refute dayon siya ni Socrates kay ana siya ang kanidang hypothetical of a madman is asking for his weapon back. So, iyang kwan is reasoning nga nung dili siya ganahan ang niya theory is if imong ihatag, diba, na-insane nga person, if imo siyang hatagan og weapon just because kanang just ni siya doesn't mean nga it would not cause harm. Ano yun? According sa iya, ang kay Cephalus, kay dili ni siya just, kay makakause siya harm. Gets ra? Sorry, mali.
Sakto man, okay, sakto.
Gali, okay. So, ang next dayon, kay Polymarchus nga partisan ethic. So, according sa anak ni Cephalus, si Polymarchus, inherits the argument and offers a more militant definition. So his theory is justice is helping friends and harming enemies. So ngano siya ga-exist is it represents a mind versus time ethic. So iyahang view is that the world as a place of competition and conflict where loyalty to one's own side, which is through family, friends, or country, is paramount. So, kani siya, di ba? It's about helping friends and harming enemies. Nga dili ganahan si Socrates ani is gi-refute niya because Socrates pounces on the fallibility of human judgment. Which means nga, we often mistake bad people for friends and good people for enemies. Meaning, iyahang rule would lead us to harm the good. Kanang iyang i-argue nga that a just man should never injure anyone. Iyang i-use nga analogy is analogy of music or horsemanship. A skill cannot be used to make someone less skilled. Similarly, justice is a human virtue that cannot be used to make someone less virtuous through injury. Nagets ra? Nice questions. Napala ra jud. Sa mag-recap ta. Unsa ang kanang theory ni Cephalus? Sabihin that. Yes. Yes. So nganong gi-refute ni siya ni Socrates?
Because if always giving back to the people mang part, like you owed a debt man, if someone you owed a debt, like buang na tao ihatagan ka kutsilyo, kung malhatagon mo balik ang kutsilyo, nabuang pa yun na tao, why is it just tama na himuon mo? Is it rational lang himuon mo na? Yes or no?
Yes, tama. So next is kay Polymarchus. So unsa gali ang theory ni Polymarchus?
It's about helping your friends and harming our enemies.
Very good. So nga na siyang i-refute siya ni Socrates.
Because justice is a virtue, it should not harm others.
Yes. So ang last nga justice is from Thrasymachus. His theory is the radical cynicism. So, ang iyang theory is justice is nothing other than the advantage of the stronger. Why it exists is that it is a theory of political realism and cynicism. Thrasymachus argues that laws are merely dressed up clothing or a con game manufactured by rulers to serve their own self-interest. So, ang kaning Thrasymachus nga radical cynicism, kaya ang keyword aning why it exists is that it is manufactured by rulers to serve their own self-interest. Self-interest, gid siya. He asserts that injustice is more natural and leads to happier life than justice. So, iyang justice is opposite siya. Injustice is more natural and leads to a happier life than justice. So, si Clifton's rescue dayon, sa iyahang story, a bystander, Clifton, tries to save the theory by suggesting justice is whatever appears to be in the interest of ruler. So, ang justice gid ani is more on self-interest. So, ang the response dayon ni Socrates ani is the craft analogy. Socrates argues that every craft is practiced for the benefit of the subject, not the practitioner. A doctor, insofar as he is a doctor, serves the patient, a pilot serves the passenger, and a shepherd, to be a good shepherd, must tend to the welfare of the sheep. Therefore, a true ruler must command for the advantage of his subjects. So, ang kay Juan ha, what we note here is that ang kay Tracy Marcos is injustice is more natural sa iya ha. Pero, ang gi-refute din ni siya ni Socrates na a ruler must command for the advantage of his subjects, dili kay for his own advantage. Nagets ra?
Questions, guys. Like, pwede magpumunta mo dito.
Yeah.
So, what if lugar? Di ba, kung inom lang si Machos nga, who is over, it is, justice is benefits to who is stronger man. So, kung ano lugar ko no, what if ang rulers kay mag-make of mistake and then pass laws that harm the stronger sa own lugar. Kan ba? What if rulers make mistakes and pass laws that actually harm themselves? So, mag-create sila law. Pero, ang katong law nga ilang gihimo is makaharm sa ilang kaugalingon na gihapon. So, kung saon lugar na, ma-apply ba gihapon na ang idea ni sinuglo nga makuha? Oo.
Kay anak man si Kasi Marcos nga di ba refute siya ni Socrates. Kaya naman si Kasi Marcos nga rulers are not really strong if they don't know how to use their real power to benefit themselves. What does it mean? Power alone is not enough to rule, but you need the skill and knowledge to make it work, just like how a philosopher can work.
Nabay question?
Ako kay question sa kaning igan ni sa atong mga higher year na kaning ang question niya is why can't Socrates won against Tracy Marcos? Like why can't he convince nga mo ni siya ang justice in terms sa kanang how Socrates explain it to kaning Tracy Marcos?
How? Isa to? Wow.
Kaning why can't Socrates won against Tracy Marcos? Like nganong di niya ma-convince?
Ang gingan man, ngayon po si Marcos nga kung ang justice is relative, it varies from city to city, constitution to constitution. Kung hindi siya kadaw kay, ang justice kay kung
Dahil lagi man from other people's perspective.
Ang isa pud nga matubag na to ani kay is that kaning si Tracy Marcos is very kaning bitaw self-centered nga tao tas dili siya kaning
bold pag yun.
nga bubalik ta tong pinakauna nga gi-explain ni sir nga ay katong sa libro nga if a youth unsa to ma-convince ba nimo ang tawo if mag-refuse siya magkaning magkuan license. So mo na kaning murag idea nga kaning murag dili makadaog si Socrates kang Tracy Marcos in terms of justice muna.
Aside po sa katunggingon ni Juan mga anong dabay tendency nga ang isa ka ruler is that hindi mo siya set of rules na maka-affect sa iya ha, which is I feel like dili na siya may tabo. It's because yeah, and aside di ba ang thinking ni analogy ni Socrates is kay kanang ang di ba ang sufficient nga mulit is that katong vested sa katubitawang analogy nga kalimot ko sa ano ha
Okay.
Sa
Keep.
dili katubitawang
bangka,
Double light man.
ang chef.
Balay? Township?
Nakaliwat tinuon ko. Pero katong noble lie man ata tong kuan na they not for the good, and then at the same time dili sila makagrant na if kanang dili sila capable. So it lies on the capability of the ruler ninyo. So most probably dili sila mabutang na ang posisyon kung maka-harm sila.
Napalain
Napa. Pero yapon na sa kuan. Di ba sa kaning libro kay naay suggest si Pichon nga strategy sa kuan kasi Marcos. Ang question dire is why did he reject Pichon's strategy? Ang sa reason ni si Marcos na niya itong reject.
Ang sa tuyo?
Why did si Marcos reject Pichon's strategy?
Katong strategy kay kato. I call a man who makes it stronger at the moment when he is making mistakes.
Sana?
At I think
I think ingon ni Clifton kay justice is entirely flimsy and arbitrary. Sometimes the rules work to the advantage of the stronger, sometimes they do not. Sige.
pero one
Basig sa kuan, sometimes they do not.
I think also
Kaya na siya ang strong kay kuan. Ang strong para kang klase Marcos kay kuan, really strong, and rulers are only really rulers when they correctly pursue their self-interest. Ito ang ganyan.
katong kasi Marcos mo kay hindi continue ang justice for Puma. It's about power, but he has adjusted his view na dayon na hey ang view nag-ato kontra si Marcos. Hindi siya dito ka. He now says that rulers are only strong when they correctly pursue their own self-interest. Diba kay kung self-interest kaya imong buhat ayun na imong sundon kay mas manageable ka anang imong hagyon. So ingon siya dire. This means that being a real ruler isn't just about having power. It's about using it wisely and interestingly. Buhatan ni imong self-interest into a wiser way. But Socrates and Thrasymachus manjot kay seems that ni-agree sila ani nga point man yun, and then sila nga justice is a kind of knowledge like music or medicine. It says that it is a skills that can be taught and practiced. So kini dong skills kay ma-practice daw ni nato. So just like the medicine, which is kung more na kay knowledge ana nga mga butang maka-benefits gina sa ibuhang themselves. So ingon siya dito nga Socrates adds niya Socrates nga if justice is a skills, then it should be used to help others. Kay skills man nimo, so kailangan nimo tabangan ang tao kay it is analogy between doctors and lawyers. So kung na kay skills ana, so kanang ang justice imo na siyang itabang to help others. Inin siya dito nga just like a doctor heals. This challenge Thrasymachus' earlier idea that justice is just about benefiting the strong. Socrates wants to show that true justice is valuable because it improves people's lives, not just because it serves the powerful. So meaning, magets naman di ba kay Lord, ako magdin siyang kung usa akong understand ani nga passage ba, magdin ako bibutang. So muna ni siyang justice is not just about benefiting the strong, because justice man gyud kay ito na maggamit ka justice so that it improves the people lives, and then dili lang kay i-serve lang kung unsay naka-benefit sa tao kay ma-serve lang because sa kung kinsa tong mas powerful. So I think munang gina-play ni Socrates bitaw. Pero ambot lang kung naman idea po. Idea.
Sige ito nga question.
I-reject ni kasi Marcos ang idea ni Cliff.
Ni Clip. Ano sa'yo answer ako?
Ang ang iyang mga ni Christopher kay rulers work to the advantage of the stronger. Sometimes they do not. So feel ko katong they do not ang disadvantage. Pero ang kaya ano na siya, the strong, para kang sa Marcos na yun kay ang strong kay ito yung rulers who are only really rulers when they correctly pursue their self-interest. So dili siya like strong din sila gid dili lang sometimes.
Bottom line, ano no, kay ang constant is that the rulers are able to those in power can only make rules. Even if they make mistakes, that's inevitable because they are human. Just like how the utopia crumbled kay diba, sa aristocracy. Himo sila mistakes, but himo na silang oligarch. Ay, democracy ba to? Democracy.
Oligarchy, then replaced by democracy.
Democracy, may tyranny din, diba?
Depende pag mag-virtuous rightful king ka, then may yung tyrant or
So, ang mistakes, kuan siya, dili siya malikayan.
But kuan instead ato kay kanang kuan ni isa to ni Tracy Marcos nga ang ruler, a true ruler is an expert nga kanang ilahang ginabuhat is objective for themselves only for to secure their self-interest. So mo na siya nga ingon man to ni naglitupon nga makamake og mistake ang mga kuan sa to basta ka to mo na siya ang kuan to maintain their power and status as a ruler.
Proceed na ta sa next.
Conclusion ta,
Sa kato.
chapter 1. Okay, go. So, chapter 1, ang conclusion niya is, di ba si Socrates kay wala gid siya na iyaharang nabuhat at the end of chapter 1 is napasilence ra niya ang iyahang mga kuan, pero wala siya naka-provide jud og concrete definition of what justice is. So nagkuan ra siya og 3 preliminary sketches for why justice is superior than injustice. Justice is superior to injustice. Strength, justice is stronger than injustice because even a band of thieves need honor among themselves, which is a form of justice to cooperate and achieve their goals. In wisdom, justice is wiser, as experts in a field, like musicians, do not compete to get the better of one another, but to work in harmony. And then lastly, in happiness, the soul as a sieve. Ang gisuggest ni Socrates is that the unjust soul is like a perforated jar or sieve. The unjust person chases fleeting bodily pleasures that evaporate, leaving them enslaved to constant desire. Conversely, the pleasures of the mind are permanent and under our control, leading to true form and lasting happiness. So, ang takeaway is Socrates said that justice is superior to injustice. So, start of chapter 2. So, chapter 2 is the students' revolt against utopia. Okay. So, naatay the 3 categories of good. Si Glaucon described as having an erotic personality. What do you mean by erotic? Erotic iyang personality. What is meant by the word erotic?
Passionate or like curious.
Dili ko siya may nga bold.
Ang erotic in this sense is devoted, meaning he has a very devoted personality.
Pwede ba na siya kan sa curious?
Yes. Marked by indiscriminate curiosity, demands that Socrates provides justice is good for its own sake rather than just for its rewards. He classified all goods into 3 categories to find where justice belongs. Kabalo mo sa main 3 justice? Kaning 3 goods.
Good in itself, good only for consequences, good both dayon.
Okay. So, naitulo, goods for their own sake, goods for their consequences, and the best category. So, goods for their own sake is trivial or harmless pleasures that bring no consequences. Goods for their own consequences is task or drudgery that we endure only for the best results. Ang example ani is exercise, painful medical surgery, or working for a wage. While the best category activities that are both joyful in themselves and beneficial in their results. So, now may mga insights, shares, recap na lata. What's good for their own sake?
Kuan harmless.
Brings pleasure that brings no consequences. What's good for their consequences?
Good only for its consequences for kuan. Sometimes
We endure only for the best results. And then the last category is both what?
it's both kuan.
Okay. Sige, next is glucon notes. I go. No, wait. One, go.
Kung manggod ka ng si Sir ba kay made mention about discussing about the ambiguities sa book. And then nag-made mention din ang ganong ay na siya. In particular, Glaucon harps on the ambiguity in Socrates' refrain that justice is good for persons. So why do you think nga let us say dili agree or somewhat kulangan si Glaucon sa definition ni Socrates about justice is good for persons?
So sa ako diri sa question na sa una kay kuan. Since mention man ni Socrates nga justice is good. Later dayon, Glaucon wanted to extract what Socrates meant by good. So ang atong unang sa is unsay pasabot ni
Usa man gid
Socrates
ang
nga
good para sa
good.
people.
Oh,
What is really the good for the people? So, isa nga. Maybe.
unsay pasabot ni Socrates sa justice is good.
Isa nga. Kaya,
Yeah. So motong ga question si Glaucon ato kay Glaucon believes that the concept of justice is not inherent to human. Justice was created by the weak to overpower the strong. So mo din na siya nga na kuan nga justice as a social construct. So sa ginagawa. Glaucon believes that the concept of justice is not inherent in human. Justice was created by the weak to overpower the strong. So, mo na siya justice as a social construct.
Kanang what kuan kay so justice para sa ako ba dili justice para sa ilang ba social construct.
murag mo sunod na.
Depende sa tao.
So, katong kuan din ni, di ba ni gusto ni Glaucon nga unsa dulo kuno ka ang justice, ano dulo kuno ang justice good. I think nasunod na siya sa katong ginabreak din katong unsa gid ang justice katong like example kini sa ang justice kay it's either trivial pleasure like kung mukaon kag example mukaon kag ice cream kuan mukaon kag ice cream joyful na siya but dili na but not deeply meaningful so wala gyapon na siya pulos nya na isa nga katong burdensome duties which is like better medicine or hard work na trabaho ka para makagain og money pero dili daw kuno siya enjoyable but useful kay makagain makang kwarta di ba and then natong lastly katong ingon siya katong both bitaw na joyful and beneficial. Ang justice mo daw kuno kay it is like learning or creating something meaningful. So, ang giniglaw ko dire nga he wants to prove that justice is belong to the third category, which is katong both bitaw enjoyable and then meaningful. So kay kuan man daw third category, not just useful, dili lang kuno daw useful, but justice is inherently rewarding, kanang makabenefit sa imuha. So ingon sa dito kay gikapoy na daw kuno siglaw kun upaminaw nga unsa mo why is justice is necessary i burden. So mo din siya nga he wants a defense, gusto siya kanang arguments nga what is really the justice is. So giglaw kon imagine din to niya bitong state of nature o katong a time before laws or government o katong din siya nga in that world people acted out of pure self-interest, and then this pure self-interest like Racimacos kung bitaw concept of justice ka justice he suggests that it is a way for the weak to protect themselves from the strong. So muna ang iyang sa state of nature na justice is for the weak to protect themselves from the strong. It wasn't born from virtue, it was born from fear and necessity. So nabuhat ng justice kay out of fear and necessity kay basin daw panon sila sa mas stronger sa ila unsaon nila pag-combat tong inato. So mo din ang nabuo ang state of nature. Ay sa
So basically, kay Glocon, opposite siya kay
Racimacos,
Marcos na justice kaya ingon man siya si Marcos is for the strong mind, they use it to benefit themselves. Meanwhile, kay Glocon is it's used to
it used to protect the weak from the strong.
Ang kuan mo pud di Glocon is that people tend to believe in the second category of good, which is the goods of consequence. So gusto siya nga dapat ang mga tao daw kay ma-influence ni Socrates nga mga tao believe sila nga ang third category of good ang the best category.
Justice.
Yes.
Reward.
So unsa man gid ang definition? Unsa man gid?
So kung sa base lang kang Glaucon nga justice, ang iya yung gina-favor is katul yung not just useful but also beneficial.
It's joyful and it's beneficial.
Oo. Ma-enjoy sa tao and then
Now to get the benefit, yes.
question daw.
Ang question kay nganong gitawag siya ambiguous ba?
Ay ambigu. Unfamiliar na
Dili sense. Pero nganong gitawag niya nga ang justice is good. Ambiguous siya.
Sa kinsa nagkan
Si Glocon.
ano nga kay katong yung na state of nature katong ano siya nga before gitaw sa any politics nga before law kay people are naturally self-interest. So kay self-interest man dagay kay differences dagay kay away. So mo nga justice gihimo siya para mag-compromise. So people agree not to harm each other to avoid being harmful. So justice is not natural goodness mo yung ingon ni Glocon, but a necessary restraint, possibly invented by the weak, not the strong. Kaya para bitaw patas, kaya di ba kung strong ka, kaya mas labaw ka, kung weak, so mag-i-invented siya para sa weak, para mapatas sila. No? So, mo ang pala ng Glocon, the state of nature.
state of nature.
So, agree ko sa iyo. Agree ko sa iyo.
So proceed to the social contract. Social contract and the ring of guides. Gauges. To illustrate why people are generally unjust by nature, Glaucon proposes a primitive state of nature theory. He argues that justice is not a natural instinct but a necessary evil, or a truce invented by the weak to protect themselves from being victims of the strong. So ano ninyo gidiscuss kanina? He reinforces this with the myth of the Gyges, a story of a shepherd who finds a magic ring of invisibility and uses it to commit murder, seduction, and the seizure of a throne. Glaucon posits that anyone with such power would be unjust. suggesting that people only behave justly because they fear being caught. Si Adamtos adds that conventional education is hypocritical, as even the gods are depicted in the works of Homer and Hesiod being bought off by the sacrifices of the wicked. So, na-discuss naman ni Persita. So, in the chapter 2 gyapon, building the city from pigs to luxury, si Socrates proposes looking at justice writ large by constructing a city in thought, assuming that the same features that make a city will also apply to the individual. So, the city of pigs, ang Socrates, described niya siya as a healthy city of need based on the principle of specialization, one person, one job. In this city, people only produce what is necessary for survival. Can you give me examples of kanang unsa ang ilahang i-produce nga kanang necessary for survival? Food,
clothing, and shelter.
yes. So, fixed to luxury. So, the luxury dayon kay ang fevered city. Locon rejects this as a city for animals and demands human luxuries like couches, perfume, and courtesans. Socrates warns that these unnecessary desires will lead to a shortage of land, triggering war with neighbors, and the requirement for a professional class of protectors. So, next question, discussion.
Sinakay pangutan. Ikaw, Sim, sinakay pangutan.
Punta na din.
Ang concept sa utopia itself is something bothering kay diba, one person equals to
One job.
job. So, what if ilang job kay ganun?
Dili alone.
No, kanang kanang dili siya fair na ang birth of a natural talent kay mo determine sa place sa isa ka tao sa isa ka tao.
Kami magkasya. Imong
Kuan siya murag analogy.
Unfair
Hygienic at
Kapag-base.
unfair ang construction sa utopia. Oh, you're limited to one task at a time.
But that task man sa that is especially karang it was kaya ka na mag-talented ba kanang pag-take man sa Utopia. However,
What if dagan ka talent?
no.
What if dagan ka maayong skill?
Oh yeah. By insisting that one person specializes in that one function for which nature makes them most competent, a society according to Socrates achieve justice along the lines from each other according to talent and each according to talent. If we accept that nature distributes talent and aptitudes unequally, Socrates' view on justice do not follow. So, ito gani. Tumrag tinuod yun na, but in nature man jud dili sa so-called utopia ni ana, if not all individuals have talents man jud ni ang paghatag man sa nature is unequal man jud. So that is why ang the utopia padaan ni Socrates is flawed from the start katong sa jobs padaan because dili man equal ang paghatag sa talents man. There might be multiple people that have the same talent na at this specific job.
So, move ta si the guardians and military psychology. The guardians of the city must be selected based on a specific psychological disposition called spiritedness or thumos. This is a middle ground between reason and desire, involving an excitable current of energy that responds to honor and shame. Socrates illustrates this with the story of Leontius, a man who was angry at his own eyes for their shameful desire to gawk at a pile of corpses. Regarding gender roles, Socrates argues that the sex of a person is irrelevant to being a guardian, using the analogy that bald and hairy men differ naturally but are both fit to be tailors. He insists that women can be soldiers and rulers if they possess the requisite spiritedness. May question, Annie? Discussion? So, nagets ra?
But however, sa itong gingon nimo na sa itong mapantay-pantay jud ang guardian. But according sa man sa diri sa book na gibasa, women can be guardians but they cannot be as powerful like as the male ba.
Pero ang gi-insist ana ni Socrates is that they cannot be powerful pero they can still be soldiers. Ang iyang point is that even though dili sila parehas ka isog as men, pwede gyapon sila mainana if they possess the skill of spiritedness. Mo na iyang argument. Next na. Sige. The molding of character, the censorship and training. So, because the guardian spirits are volatile, they must be educated through strict state-controlled nurture. First is the censorship of poetry. Second is musical regulation. Third is sex and fraternization. So, sa censorship of poetry is that Socrates insists on deleting passages from poets, including kay Homer, that make children fear death or depict the gods as wearing and immoral. Censorship of poetry ha kay deleting passages from poets that make children fear death. Ang kaning musical regulation is that rhythms that promote relaxation or unbribed ferocity are prohibited. Only harmonious marching rhythms that instill self-control are allowed. Kaning sa sex and fraternization, to maintain spirit de corps, personal sex trysts are discouraged and men and women exercise naked together to learn to see the spirit rather than the body. So, ang key words ani sa ilaha tulo, censorship of poetry is fear of death. Ang kining sa musical regulation kay harmonious marching rhythms that instill self-control. Self-control ni ang kuana musical regulation. Ang kanina sa sex and fraternization is to maintain a spirit de corps. Confusion, discussions, wala na. So, let's move on sa last. Si radical social engineering. So, to ensure the guards serve the common good and not their own interest, Socrates proposes the abolition of private property and the family for the ruling class. So, another ang communal living, removal of children, and then the eugenics. In the communal living, guardians live in barracks, eat at common tables, and are forbidden from owning wealth. And kani sa removal of children, newborns are taken to a communal nursery so that parents do not know their biological offspring. This prevents the conflict of interest between family loyalty and public duty. The lifeguard analogy, where a mother might save her own child over another. Diri din sa eugenics is that the state arranges marriages and uses quality control to ensure the best offspring, with defective children being hidden in unseen places. So, very controversial, problematic gid siya nga ko social engineering. Ano mo
Na ako time pero mobalik man nimo chapter 5 man nimo balik ang ako question ko about chapter 5 Aristotle rebuttal niya so iyan ako
na mo i-share
Chapter 5 kasi.
Go. So, funny siya, runoff. These utopian proposals are intended to prevent the Trasimarchian ethic of self-assertion from corrupting the state's protectors. So, chapter 3 titled Out of the Cave and Into the Light and Back Again. So, kani siya is exploring Plato's rejection of equality in favor of natural hierarchy and his theory that only a specific type of person is fit to rule. So, first topic is the rejection of equality and the noble life. Plato begins by challenging the democratic teacher, Protagoras, who claimed that Zeus gave all humans an equal sense of justice and shame to make communal life possible. Plato argues that knowledge of justice is not a democratic sense, but a deeply theoretical philosophy beyond the mental capacity of an average person. So, to maintain this hierarchy, he proposes the noble lie. Familiar naman mo sa noble lie?
Yes.
A myth claiming that while all citizens are born from earth, they possess different metals in their souls. Gold for rulers, silver for soldiers, and bronze or iron for laborers. So, ganang think ninyo nga na-exist ni ang theory? Kanang,
Sa metals.
sa metal. Ganang feel ninyo, ganang ni-exist ni siya nga theory?
Categorization.
Na may thoughts?
Because Plato sees state as in need of hierarchy. Dili tanan is capable of just like
From chapter 2 pa lang, hindi equal ang pag-distribute sa mga talents from by nature. So, you need to put hierarchy to para, differentiate
Dili
mo.
overlap ang mga tao sa ilang
So, tama.
Dapat na sila limitation, pangasa sila.
Yes.
Taman.
So, this theory exists to justify social roles and ensure that the ruler guardians who use reason to give orders are distinguished from soldier guardians who merely follow them. So, move on to the philosopher king. Ay, napay add-on thoughts, questions? Go. The philosopher king and the theory of the forms. So, the defining characteristics of future rulers is boundless curiosity, a passion for learning for its own sake that Socrates describes as erotic. Ano sa ito? Erotic? Devotion. Yes, passion. To educate this curiosity, Socrates introduces the theory of the forms or ideas. Familiar naman eh? Arguing that the physical world contains only fleeting appearances. So, for example, a rose is beautiful for a moment, but beauty itself is immutable. Objective idea that exists only in the unintelligible world. Knowledge of these forms allows the philosopher to possess permanent truth rather than chasing the sieve-like fleeting pleasures of the senses. Na question? Wala? Mag-move on ta? Okay. So, move on to sa parable of the cave. So, diri dayon ni kuan si Plato. Plato uses the parable of the cave to illustrate the human condition, where prisoners are chained to see only shadows of puppets projected by a fire, mistake these for reality. The philosopher is the rare soul who unchains themselves, scramble out of the cave, and is blinded by the sunlight. The sunlight represents
Truth? No?
truth. The tragedy of politics occurs when the enlightened philosopher returns to the cave. Their eyes are no longer adjusted to the dark, making them appear to be dysfunctional misfit to the cave dwellers who would likely execute them. So, na may thoughts, ani? Question?
Yun na ako basta mauman ang chapter.
Ay, sige, go. Gyapon. So, move on to the critique of democracy and the ship of the state. So, Plato's ultimate challenge to democracy is that it empowers public opinion. Public opinion in this context now refers to cave talk rather than disinterested knowledge. He uses the ship of the state analogy, comparing the state to a vessel where the owner is the people and the navigator or the philosopher is the expert. If the untrained passengers, the majority, seizes the helm based on their opinions, the ship is doomed. So, unsa ginamin ani nga kuan? Unsa ang gina-highlight nga belief ani ni Plato? Ang kaning critique of democracy and the ship of the state. Like unsa this theory highlights Plato's beliefs that what?
Hindi na work ang democracy.
Give you
So, ang kaning ay go. Ha?
Give you niya nga ang democracy is flawed because it treats all opinions as equally valid, failing to distinguish between genuine knowledge and a mere belief lang. Saktan ba to?
Yes. So actually, ang kaning nga theory kay although tama siya na sense, pero ang iyahag yung belief ani is that politics should be handled by experts. Just as one seeks a doctor for illness rather than a crowd's opinion. Pero tama gyapon to yung sentiments. Move on to sa the tragic downward spiral of regimes. So, Plato describes a cycle of decay where regimes inevitably degenerate due to the emergence of private property and family. So, mani, diri dayon nag-give rise ang democracy, oligarchy, democracy, and tyranny. So, democracy is the first stage of decay, ruled by those dominated by spirit or thumos and honor. It rises when mothers resent their husband's lack of ambition, instilling a warrior personality in their sons. Ang kaning sa democracy, ang highlight nga word ani is warrior personality. Ang kaning sa oligarchy is this follows go. This follows when the love of money outstrips the love of honor. The city becomes an armed camp divided between the rich and the poor. Democracy is the poor eventually seize power in the name of liberty, but Plato views this as defect because it mistakes license for freedom. It is characterized by an aimless pursuit of all desires and class warfare against the rich. Lastly, the tyranny or the final stage where people invite a populist demagogue to restore order. The tyrannical personality is ruled by unferreted eros or desire, making a monster who cannot love, be loved, or ever be satisfied. So, magawan ko ha, ang highlight ani nga mga words is democracy, warrior personality. The oligarchy is money and armed camp. Democracy, license for freedom and class warfare. And tyranny is tyrannical personality and unferreted eros. So, naikwan ani. Ito to katong sa chapter na. So,
Man guy, dili ko agree sa analogy sa katong kahitaw cave. Kay, di ba, nakagawas ka, kaya ka nag-inform na ka, enlightened na ka, hindi mo balik din ka sa cave. Parang dili na di paggawas nilang tao nga na sa cave. Para sa kay, katutang, di ba, critic nila sa democracy kay karang ang mga tao kay dili kay informed, dili kay anong kwan, pili no kay ilan na lang kanang manipulate bitaw nga kanang ginamanipulit nila ang society nga kanang ma-less informed ang tao ba like out bitaw sa Philippines like ang mga politics hate nila ang educated nga tao because gusto nila nga sila ra ang mag-rule. Para sa ako ang anong dili na lang pagawason ang anong kailangan nga mobalik siya tapos ikuha niya ang mga tao ay kanang di ba enlightened na siya, ikuha na siya tapos mobalik din siya para i-rule niya ang mga tao nga na dito pagawason sila.
For me, so there are some cases na magsimpagaw ma-ignorant sila still nakakani tinod ni baby because if let's say nag-game ako if a person stayed for his whole life na kana lang yung kabalo niya the shadows lang yun magpakitain mo siya opposite siya sa vis mo tuo siya si mo dili magsimakitan jud niya sa naong nimo jud na yung evidence mo tuo siya dili jud depende jud na siya because there are some people are too ignorant to see the truth like mga they are too dumb to accept that thing ba. That is why the philosopher king pa the enlightened one are rare because they accepted what they are seeing ba. Even though it challenges their whole worldview from because they are living in a cave papiting
So,
pa
for me
siya.
na sila magstay sa cave. No, like,
They are ruling the people in the cave mo balik siya para ma-rule. Nakoy
the people in the cave kay murag di man sila mohawa jud katulad jud working kay mo I think mo na ang kuan nga katong ignorance is bliss and then mo na ang for example mo siguro na then comes kana real world example right now is media control and censorship diba the government only wants you to know what they want you to know di na sila magpaingon pud og unsa ilahang kanang unsa ang gusto gina find out sa mga tao kay they know that it would cause tragedy.
No, tendency kay bisan pag imo bitaw ihatag na i-present nimo ang truth sa usa ka tao kay dili sila mutuo.
Oo.
Basig unsaon kay I think nagit sila ginabilib kay mao ba to gid ilang reality. Sumugod to ilang ginatuohan. So bisan pag mo pag-present mo ning tinud mo ning sa ilaha dili man to mauso. Puro useless ra gyapon.
so saan nagpagkuhan sa ilaha?
Pag enlightened bit mo
Ang way of enlightenment is what Sir called the irony of the cave. Like, di ba nakagawas naman? Mubalik tong philosophy enlightened to rule. Pero, iyang way is like creating another cave, di ba? Sir, he creates another cave. What is this cave all about? It is the noble life. It is the philosopher king thinking that sometimes we need to lie for the greater good. Diba? Like katong example niya is katong di ba natin for example like katong Syrian missiles. I think that's the essence of the story. Like the only tanan people is capable of knowing the truth. Diba? So, like kita, common people, kung kita ang common people ang katong na-trap good sa cave na wala kang gawas, more likely nga dito ra gihapon ta kanang dili ta fit according sa story dili ta fit to know the truth. We are just kanang
Ako'y about yung naka-ask ko sa atong second year na unsay possible nga mahitabo sa katong enlightened person mabalik siya sa cave. So ang ilang tubag ani sa una gikan kay Sir Paul gyapon is naay possibility nga katong enlightened person mubalik siya didto he will be killed kay ang uban nga tawo why would they listen to something wala sila kabalo nya ang ilahang mga nabal-an na is kanang naa na bitaw diha ilang mga unanglan ilahang mga tinuuhan is naara diha so nganong mo accept pa sila sa lahi nga mga ideas nga ang naa diha sa sulod is na-complete na sa ilaha. So, muna siya.
That is like literally what happened to Socrates' son.
katong sa
Socrates.
corrupted eh.
corrupted.
Because you are giving them new ideas and yung mga Athens, that is why in the book Jhon, Plato really hated democracy. Maybe why Socrates was killed man kay because the vote of the people man, hindi democracy man siya. So, due to the cave dwellers man, let's say, the people of Athens, they decided to kill the philosopher king man, si Socrates at that time. Yeah.
Do you think na kana ang philosopher king is obliged or kana voluntarily na balik sa cave?
In a sense, yes, because he is knowledgeable man. He is with that knowledge comes with power, comes with great responsibility. So with that knowledge, he is responsible and to teach the people man.
So, unsay mo ba? Obligatory or voluntary?
It's
think
it's
it's
really
voluntary.
depends on how you depends on the person, but comes with great power with great responsibility. Quote Uncle Ben man.
Pero on your own stance man.
Ako,
Unsa
for
man
me,
nimo?
I think it's voluntary. Yeah,
Kung balik niya
they only want to learn what they want to know. Kanya, ang mga information nilang gusto ingon, maura pa nilang gusto. Kaya gusto pa baya sila nga kanan na sila yung sense of control of what they know and what you should know. So, I think it's voluntary rather than obligation. Yeah, an obligation.
May like thoughts?
mo side ko kay simple na
Kuan siya?
Argue daw mga kuan, obligatory.
Argue daw obligatory. Dre na sa dre. Pamana kumana si Dave. Kani lang
Anong
istorya.
obligatory siya?
Like,
Ako'y thoughts on that.
maybe you're obliged to it because people believe in you.
Dili na bi, di pa man sila bilib kay wala pa man sila kabalo man jud. Napamag sa crossroads pa.
Wait. Also
You know what? Tungod at itong gingon nga dili tanan is capable of knowing. So parang wisdom is a privilege and knowledge that sa ilaha. So puro siya obligation nila.
Obligation to share.
to everyone bitaw na.
Pero na lang jud sa imong hapag.
Voluntary no? Kung inyo mo kung gipa-obligatory.
Pero wala naman. Kanang what?
if you were to challenge the thought ba?
Ikaw, Dave, naka-idea.
Like kanang gusto ay also gid context sa katong cave gid ay unsay like analogy kay valid ni Socrates sa pangalong emphasize niya na
The parable of the cave. In what sense? Ang main essence
Like,
yun
kung
niya.
yun si story na to.
unsay main niya point kanang
Main
kaning
point.
kuning story sa inyo kay
Kay diya mo to kuno ba?
Nagama siya.
About sa
Man
pag-rule,
jud, ano.
enlightenment.
Ay, kuan, Dave.
Only if we go out to our comfort, we can actually
Only
kanang-
by learning
Oh.
only by learning you can truly know the truth.
Oh.
Seeing it or something like that, like only
you
enlightened no dili sad only you know the truth man because there are
Di ba si Plato, critic siya democracy. Di ba, democracy is wala tayong egalitarian democracy. It is all about giving everyone fair chances. Pero kay, dili mo siya in favor of democracy. He emphasizes hierarchy. Di ba? Ang sa hierarchy nga represent sa allegory of the cave. Kanang, naalay ka ng mga people nga mas
The need
labaw.
for an expert.
Kunya naapoy ka to
The need for someone to be a follower.
follower.
Oh, pero ginanan siya na yun. Like, in a sense nga, for a community to prosper, there must be followers and a follower.
There is a distinction between the rule
And the ruler. Yes. So, mag-wrap up ta sa kuha na. So, conclusion is, the chapter concludes by providing that the philosopher is the happiest person. The philosopher is the happiest person. Unlike the tyrant, whose soul is a perforated jar, needing constant replenishment of desire, the philosopher's pleasures are mental, lasting, and under their own control. Socrates argues that the only competent judge of happiness is the philosopher, as they have experienced both bodily and mental pleasures and will always choose the latter. Thus, while the radical nature of the republic exposes the roots of injustice, it leaves a permanent gap between transcendental ideal of justice and the practical reality of politics. So, Move on to the chapter 4, which is
Chapter 4 lang kay more on critics of Republic lang na dyan na. Mga critics lang yun kayo na sa other
Tragic Republic.
mga critics lang na sa Republic kung saan mga points sa other philosophers o mga people o mga teachers niya.
Ni Abramson.
Explore.
Unsa na yung view sa ilang
views
picture no?
sa mga other, let's say generally other people na lang sa other philosophers na kailan niya. Not just quick to read lang kay siya. Opinion.
Si Oso din nasa 4D ay.
Mga critics sa katong
Sige, apel man na.
basically reflection lang yun sa katong mostly
Basahin na
ano
lang, Sim. Basahin na lang.
ayoko
Kuan lang nga mga
dili ta mag
general overview sa
general
kada.
lang
dili baya ta makaskip og chapter kay essential baya ang tanan nga chapter para mag-move ka sa other chapters. Ayun pag-argue. Chapter 4 is entitled Beyond Plato's Tragic Republic. It serves as a detailed meditation on the conclusion of Plato's Republic and the unbridgeable gap between philosophical ideas and political reality. So, first is the radical nature of injustice. Drawing on, kuha na lang. For this
The
na lang
whole
kay.
overview ano sa 4.
Kuha na lang. Mag-discussion, yung tatanan, and then questioning and thoughts.
Key points. Take away sa 4.
I-run through na lang ako, tapos sa end lang tayo tawagan. Go. So, drawing on the lectures of his teacher, Joseph Schoklar, Abramson explains that the Republic is the most radical book ever written on politics because it gets to the root of matters, specifically the root of injustice. So Schoklar argued that the book's merit lies not in its plans for utopia, but in how it shines a light on injustices that fester within the cave of ordinary human existence. This interpretation views Plato's work as a lament for the distance between ideals and reality, rooted in pessimistic sense that radical political change is impossible. So, moving on to the chasm between philosophy and politics. So, the central topic of this is the unbridgeable chasm or the fault line that separates the philosopher from the political actor. So there is two distinguisher, the role of the teacher and the tragedy of action. So the role of the teacher is the philosopher teacher must stand apart from politics to judge it according to ideals. This act of criticism is the primary contribution philosophy can make. So, in the context of the tragedy of action, when philosophers attempt to impose their ideals on recalcitrant reality, it leads to a vain and tragic effort. Abramson references Immanuel Kant's metaphor of humanity as crooked timber to illustrate that some things simply cannot be straightened without going against the grain. Moving on to the transformative power of self-knowledge, despite the political pessimism, the Republic offers a transformative moral perspective. The perspective is self-reflection, a moral compass for happiness, and sublimating eros. Self-reflection. Socrates believes that the seeking of self-knowledge changes who a person is. By detachedly observing one's own behavior, a person can no longer return to being the same unthinking individual they were before. Self-reflection and self-knowledge. A moral compass for happiness. Socrates does not lecture against the desire for own happiness. Instead, he argues that happiness, properly understood, contains its own moral compass. In Sublimating Eros, unlike later Christianized version of Platonism that saw the body as a prison, Socrates seeks to redirect rather than suppress eros. He aims to harness the erotic curiosity of the young and guide it away from the body outward the higher pleasures of the mind. So the philosopher as Midfit concludes that because the ideal republic does not exist, those who have received a Socratic education are destined to be misfits. Like the philosopher returning to the cave, they can never truly return to their old home in the real political world of the Athens. So then here comes the myth of and eternal justice. So, in conclusion to chapter 4, the Republic, Socrates introduced the myth of a democratic tale used to prove that justice is its own reward beyond its life. So we have names and origins, the judgment and reincarnation, the choices of next life, and the importance of wisdom. So in the context of names and origins, was a soldier mistakenly thought dead who was allowed to observe the afterlife and report back. In judgment and reincarnation, observed that souls are immortal and their choices have eternal consequences. For 1,000 years, the just enjoy bliss while the unjust suffer tenfold for the pain they cause others. The choices of the next life concludes that souls draw lots and are allowed to choose their next lives. Abramson highlighted that even with a free and abundant choice, many souls lack wisdom to choose correctly. Lastly, the importance of wisdom is unwise souls are often seduced by a glitter of wealth or power, which leads to future misery. Only the wise know how to weigh pleasures rationally, proving that wisdom leads to happiness across lives. So, and overall, ang kani siya nga chapter 4, it highlights that while these mythic visions provide inspiration, they leave students with the daunting real-world question whether they will ever find justice at home. So, inyong mga thoughts, sentiments,
And violent reactions. Wala ko.
unsa man. Mga thoughts ninyo. Sabotable ra ang ni-argue pa ka ganina nga unya dapat para lain. Ay,
Kung saan yung gino ko.
Yun sa inyong thoughts sa chapter 4.
unsa man, move on to sa chapter 5 or wala na ikuan.
Basically, no, chapter 4 din na because of that. Some political ideals are just way too good to be true. Like, dili sila pwede ma-fully realize kay, diba, like, kabalo mo ni Mao Zedong. Like,
Si Idol.
he ka na, grabe niya educate niya, ani, niya, daghan na kay siya. Wrong na kayo yung ka na coercive, so sobrang niya ka-coercive kay di-force man niya nga mahimog ka ng population nga ka na.
He want China to be powerhouse man. He want to double the production of rice, production of resources. But due to that, he was short-sighted sa he make decision na that yes, in a short term but in a long term
Hindi siya kuan for the people.
Marshall, our aspirations can also lead to our kuan, no?
Are doomed.
Our doom. Marshall, so, move on to chapter 5. Lagi. Chapter 5 is titled Aristotle's Ethics, the Habits of Virtue. So, this...
By ano, raguro na kanang the courage, generosity.
By virtue.
By virtue.
Sure.
What are your takeaways sa
Kasabon na nang chapter.
kaning the Nicomachean ethics?
Dili na mo aning the rejection of youthful experimentalism.
Kana, pwede po na.
So, short term in chapter 5, Aristotle famously asserts that the study of politics is not for the young. He believes that youth lack the necessary experience of the actions of life and are too easily guided by fleeting feelings and emotions rather than reason. Unlike Socrates, who cherished the restlessness and curiosity of students, Aristotle speaks to the mature and sober soul, valuing the firm and familiar anchors of the past over novelty. Over novel, constant novelty. He criticizes thinkers like Phallias of Chalcedon, who theorized that redistributing property would solve crime, arguing that such utopian ideas ignore the reality that human nature is not so easily changed. So we move to the virtue as habit or habitus. So see, Aristotle's moral theory is that virtue is not merely knowledge but a product of habit. While Plato believed that understanding the form of the good would compel one to act justly, Aristotle argues that moral character is dyed into a person from infantry through a repetition of various acts. So, ang origin ani nga theory is that gisuggest ni Aristotle, we do not become just by studying justice. Rather, we become just by doing justice acts until such behavior becomes a firm and unchanging state of character. So, a moral education we can get from this is that the goal is to hardwire a connection between desire and virtue so that the good person chooses the noble course of action effortlessly, acting from inclination rather than fresh calculations in every situation. Gets ra?
Yes.
So, just is from doing just acts. So, we move on to the doctrine of the mean. So, he proposed the Aristotle that every virtue is a moderate midpoint, the mean between two opposing vices, excess and deficiency. He characterizes the pursuit of excellence as hard work, as it requires doing the right thing to the right person at the right time and for the right reasons. So, ang kaning virtue kay naa siya courage, generosity, proper pride, temperance, and mildness. In the context of courage, it's the mean between cowardice. What is mean by cowardice is that it is excessive fear and rashness or excessive fearlessness. So courage is in between cowardice and rashness. True courage is motivated by honor rather than fear of punishment. Generosity is the mean between miserlessness and profligacy. So Aristotle notes that one must possess property to be generous, a point used to criticize Plato's abolition of property for his guardians. So in the context of proper pride or megalopsychia, the great-souled man represents the mean between vanity and small-mindedness. He thinks himself worthy of great things and is truly worth them. Context of temperance is the mean between self-indulgence or excessive appetite and insensibility, a rare deadness to physical pleasure. And then last is the mildness, which is the mean regarding anger, involving getting angry at the right things, at the right people, without being bitter or irascible. So, the role of friendship and community is Aristotle defines man as a zon politikon or a political animal, meaning we can only perfect our happiness in association with others. He identifies friendship as the greatest external good, categorizing it into three types based on utility, pleasure, or goodness. True friendship, which exists only between equals who appreciate each other's virtue, and local justice. Aristotle insists that the highest moral condition is reached within small local communities where a shared common good is possible. He rejects the idea of a global, bloodless community. So, mag-conclusion ta or sentiments sa una ay conclusion.
Sentiments ito lang.
Sentiments?
May question ba rin ako?
Sige.
Since habits should be developed in the city we grow up with, how would you determine when you're doing honorable, and also how would you determine if your doing is accepted by the society?
It's really depends man. Sa
Yeah.
city ba it's your values and your belief is based on your
Your
sa
surroundings.
surroundings mo, culture mo,
Yeah,
society.
your
So
culture.
if it's acceptable if the city or your society is okay na, but if you go to another city, what is acceptable to your city or like your
Might
place
not
might be
be
not
acceptable
acceptable to the others.
Yes.
So how would you determine?
If you're doing
Relative lang yun
honorable.
siya.
It depends on the context.
Context and intention.
It depends on the place, Jude.
Ah,
I think it more on relies on it depends on the place where you are at. Kaya if you put it in as perspective, nga kanang you can see it as today. Rachelle, if you go here, 'di ba? People are allowed to express themselves freely. Pero if you go to another country such as
Saudi.
mga Dubai, Saudi, you're not, if you are a man and you're transgender, you're not allowed to have very long hair. You're not allowed to wear makeup. So Rashelle, in a sense, if you put it in a contemporary world example perspective.
So, ang ethics niya is finding the golden mean among kan dili too much, dili pod.
Yes.
Then basically refute ang utopia ni Aristotle said ay ni Plato. I-refute ni Aristotle Jude ang mga key points ni Plato sa utopia, such as katong guardian, because let's say like anak ang guardian, what that makes dili ing na nakinsay lang ang anak yun niya, like random anak ni shuffle, what makes them incentivize man because of human nature man, no, what makes them incentivize na kaning bata na ni na protektahan ako, di man ko balokin sa man, even though guardian ko ay from, let's say from the gingon pa ni Plato, from ana why i-shuffle ang mga bata kay
Makafocus sila sa ilang civic role.
dili para dili bias ba, example lang anak na ko ni kani napakauna ko niya nauna ko ni protektahan ako niya all the time. But if isa ka block isang anak nimo, like daghan kayo, what makes you incentivize magprotektahon sila sa himo nimo anak sad? Like say na ko ani
gutom na kayo.
gamay. How what makes them incentivized to like do that thing man, like protect the children sa nursery man, like
Dili man ilaha.
oh di man sila kabalo which one ilaha man, therefore tawaganan na yung word kalimot ko, but they have no incentive man jud from their point of view man.
Sila ang magatingan sa bata, di ba?
Dili.
Dili sila magpadako. Igura nila iluwal, ibutang na din sa nursery room. Manadayo,
Pero
nila.
dili na ay nanindriya sa kay Aristotle that
Kay Eric, the point ko sa man.
there's no, basically in Aristotle's ethics man jud, he refute the Plato's politics, kay Plato's utopia, by saying that taking things like property stuff is inhumane by its own. It gives them no incentives to do what their job actually is, because from Aristotle's point of view
Wala
man,
sila yung motivation
No.
to kuan.
Gets.
Ay,
nako yung nakakala, pero nakalimutan ako yung word na to dito sa more.
katong sa anger man to, Juhan.
Ano ito? Yeah.
Kung sa property,
Oh, yeah.
property. Ba, anger? Or no?
I think generosity to, I think.
Generosity.
Conclusion na ta.
Yeah.
Para pa may sentiments. Conclusion na?
Yes.
Sige. So, Aristotle concludes that ethics and politics are inseparable. While ethics focuses on morally good person, politics focuses on the good citizen. He argues that a person cannot be fully virtuous outside of a city or polis because the city is prior to the individual, providing the social environment and virtue where virtue can be practiced. He suggests that while it remains possible to be a good person in a corrupt city, the two identities ideally merge when a city governs according to the common good. Ultimately, Aristotle's theory exists to provide a practical roadmap for human flourishing that accounts for the crookedness of human reality rather than constructing a fancy picture of a state that can never exist. So, let's move on to chapter 3, Aristotle's Politics.
6.
Ay, sorry.
Gutom na ka?
Aristotle's Politics, Severed Hands, and Political Animals. So, this is the transition from the utopian speculations of Plato to an empirical practical study of politics. So, the practical art of politics is Aristotle departs from his teacher Plato by asking what the observation of actual government can teach us. Rather than trying to escape history through idealized thought, he argues that politics is a practical art, and politicians must work within existing conditions to find what is feasible, often making trade-offs between stability and justice. Aristotle's methodology involves collecting and classifying various constitutions, noting the sheer variety of regimes, including kingships, aristocracies, oligarchies, democracies, and tyrannies. He observed that while definition of citizenship might shift overnight due to a revolution, the city itself is always a species of association designed to achieve a purpose individuals cannot accomplish alone. So, in Political Naturalism and the Zone of Politikon, Aristotle's most famous contribution is the theory that a man is a zon politikon, or a political animal by nature. So, he provides three arguments to support this political naturalism: the all-natural ingredients argument, the teleological argument, and the logical priority argument. In the natural ingredients argument, since the city is built from natural units, families, and villages, the resulting whole is also natural. In the theological argument, just as an acorn's nature is fully realized when it becomes an oak tree, human nature is only perfected within the city. We study the refined case to understand the final cause or purpose of development. In the logical priority argument, Aristotle argues that the city is prior to the individual. Using the analogy of a severed hand, he notes that a hand cut off from a body cannot function and is therefore no longer a hand. Similarly, a human cannot be fully realized or complete outside the moral goods of political life. So, the critique of Plato's Republic is Aristotle uses his naturalism to challenge Plato's abolition of private property and the family for the guardian class. Its neglect of the common good, he argues that people pay most attention to what is their own, and that common property inevitably receives the least care. The weak and weary family, he rejects Plato's communal child-rearing, asserting that it would produce diluted family feelings. He famously remarks that sweet wine mixed too much water produces a tasteless mixture, like a child with 1,000 fictional parents is neglected by all. Lastly, the virtue of ownership is Aristotle defends private property on moral grounds, arguing that virtues like generosity and proper pride requires the possession of raw materials to be practiced. He accuses Plato of overemphasizing unity at the expense of plurality that defines a city. So, moving on to theology and natural inequalities, Aristotle theological view assumes that nature is designed with purpose, which leads to his justification for social hierarchy. So, in the role of woman and natural slavery, the role of woman, Aristotle viewed the female as an infertile male whose psychological design dictated a passive role in procreation. He argued women find happiness by accepting male rule, as their reason reportedly lacks authority over their emotion. Natural slavery states that existence of natural slaves persons he believed were so devoid of reason that they functioned only as inanimate articles of property or instruments of labor. While he critiqued legal slavery based on mere military force, he argued that a benign association between a rational master and a non-rational slave allowed both to fulfill their natural functions. So, lastly, the justice, equality and localism. Aristotle views justice as a political virtue for settling the inevitable disputes of a community, rejecting Plato's vision of a conflict-free state. He divides justice into two competing concepts: arithmetic equality or rectificatory justice, and proportionate equality or distributive justice. In the arithmetic equality, this applies to law courts and theft, where the goal is to restore equality by treating everyone as mathematically equal regardless of their moral worth. In the context of proportionate equality, this applies to the distribution of honors and political office. Aristotle argues that it is unjust to give the same rewards to those of different merit. Rewards must be given in proportion to one's contribution to the city's moral project. Finally, Aristotle rejects the idea of global justice or cosmopolitanism. He asserts that justice can only sustain itself within small, local, self-governing communities where citizens share a common good. For Aristotle, politics is an ethical science, and power should reside with the practicality wise, whose best exemplify human excellence. Takeaways from chapter 6. And then
Gutom na?
kwanta. Or kuan na lang ta, like takeaways from chapter 1 to 6 ta. Oh, final thoughts.
Natanong na ko.
Sige na kay para
Siguro
maano
ang
ta.
kuan na lang kanang plan for the ones kay kuan man kanang ang nakabutang manggod sa instructions ni sir is that magpa-oral siya and then
Thoughts ninyo from chapter 1 to 6. So, ako, for me personally, I think it just highlights how society where society and how society came from with kanang mga rules and kanang our practices of what is normal and what is just like mura na siya akong nakita. Mura to
ang approach po niya kay very normative kayo. Of course,
actually.
normative kayo. For example, ang views niya on women, man, they are only for tuala. Ang ilahan lang kay, ang purpose lang sa babae kay, para lang procreation, para kuan, manganak lang. Ano na yung purpose? And then, ikita niya only as an extension of a man, not as an equal. Dili siya na view as a woman. Dili siya as an extension, as procreation. Dili gani dapat for friendship, for a relationship. It's more of like, ang ilahang relationship dynamic nila kay para lang anakan ka. More, which is very
Recreation and following the male.
lang. Very double standard kasi Aristotle.
idealist kasi practical si aristocrat. Like, dili man gusto ni i-play nga na like
Dili ka
private
madungog
property, na ay family.
Dili ka mo doon. Sige na.
Yun na, try.
Dahil.
Si aristocrat kay
Kamo.
his real.
Kamo.
Pero ano nun, controversial yung takeaways ni Aristotle.
Na
Iyang mga views lang ba?
I think iyang views kay more on ga reflect with atong norm sa time
Sa the
nila
time,
before. Kay if you put it in the perspective of now, kay di naman kayo inana ang sentiments from people, except maybe kanang mga older generations na gid inana pud siguro ilang naka-feel gyapon. Pero yeah. Kamo, take aways guys.
Rachelle,
Kanila pa niya storya kayo. So,
nasa imong last
nasa mo last huling takeaway.
ito storya. Kanila pa niya storya.
Okay na, girl.
Hey, bye-bye.